Section 3 topics: product labels, SDS and the DFU. Learning objectives: product labels, product transport, product storage, safety data sheets. Section summary. Section 3.1 Learning objectives. This section describes how to comply with the supply and provide advice on the use of 1080 pest animal bait products. The key concepts in this section include: the product label is a legal document. 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products are classified as hazardous chemicals under the Global Harmonisation System Hazardous Substances Victorian OHS. Sales of hazardous substances Victorian OHS must be accompanied with a safety data sheet on first supply and subsequently on request. Users of 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products are responsible for complying with the directions for use and the product label. On successful completion of this section, participants will be able to describe the necessity of complying with the product label, using and supplying the safety data sheets. Section 3.2 Product Labels. As stated previously, it is a legal requirement that all persons using 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products in Victoria use those products in compliance with the respective 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait product labels. The product label is a legal document. Labels must comply with codes issued by the APVMA. Chemical product labels are written to a standard format and contain information under similar headings. This information is intended to ensure safe use, storage and handling, and is the primary source of information for safety. The label and directions for use. The label is the main means of communicating product information from the manufacturer to the user. Manufacturers must follow the APVMA label guidelines, which provide a standard format for labels. The label gives directions on use, protection of wildlife, stock and the environment, storage and disposal, safety directions, and first aid. The directions for the use of 1080 pest animal bait products in Victoria provides additional instructions on how 1080 and PAPP must be used in Victoria. These include restrictions on aerial baiting, when baits must be buried, timing of bait laying, recover, destruction and disposal. Before purchasing a product, the label and directions for use should be read to determine whether the necessary protective clothing and equipment is available, whether it is the correct product for the job, how much is required for the purpose, and whether the chemical can be used safely under the application conditions. Resellers of chemicals have an important role to reinforce label requirements to the users at the point of sale and should be familiar with the content and format of labels for the chemicals they sell. This should also ensure that labels are not covered with price stickers or other information. Signal heading. The signal heading on a label indicates how poisonous the product is and gives guidance on safety. Schedule 7 is the most poisonous category and has a signal heading of dangerous poison. Section 3.3 Product Transport. Persons involved in all stages of the transport of agricultural and veterinary products must be aware of the associated hazards. If chemicals are handled incorrectly, dangerous goods can endanger people, property, and the environment. 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products must be transported in accordance with the product label, the safety data sheets, and all other relevant acts, regulations, codes, and statutory requirements. Rules, procedures, and guidelines must be observed. Laws are for everyone who is involved in the transport of these goods. 1080 and PAPP pest animal baits must be transported in a secure and safe manner in such a way that the product is not lost in transit and that the packaging remains intact to prevent access and exposure to unauthorised persons, pets or livestock. For further information on transport regulations, refer to Operational Elements 01.2 Product Dispatch of the AgSafe Code of Practice. This can be downloaded from the Module Resources page. Section 3.4 Product Storage. 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products must be stored in a secure and safe manner in such a way that unauthorised persons, pets or livestock cannot have access to bait products, and only be kept or stored in the original container bearing the original label as supplied by the manufacturer. Most AgSafe accredited stores achieve this level of security by using a poisons cage or cupboard which is locked at all times. Before storing or disposing of a pest control product or its container, read the label to determine where and how to store the chemical, and the correct disposal of the empty container. Containers which have held product are not to be used for any other purpose and must be disposed of in accordance with the product label directions. Section 3.5 Safety Data Sheets. A safety data sheet is a 16-section document that provides information on the identity, health hazards, physical and chemical properties, precautions for handling, storage and disposal, personal protective equipment, as well as what to do in the event of a fire or accidental release. In Victoria, every hazardous chemical or substance, which includes 1080 and PAPP, must be accompanied by a safety data sheet on the first supply or subsequently on request. Manufacturers and importers must produce a safety data sheet for the hazardous substances they supply. All agricultural and veterinary chemical outlets should be able to readily access the safety data sheets to provide to end users. It is recommended that a safety data sheet accompanies all sales of 1080 and PAPP. Hazardous chemicals and hazardous substances information, such as hazard statements and risk phrases, are provided in Section 2 of the safety data sheets. Under OHS legislation, employers must make the safety data sheets for a hazardous substance readily accessible to employees and ensure there is a hazardous substance register in the workplace. Under Commonwealth WHS legislation, safety data sheets have to be available to the workplace for any worker who is using, storing or handling the chemical, emergency service workers or anyone else who is likely to be exposed to the chemical. Please note, a farm is considered a workplace under OHS legislation in Victoria and Commonwealth WHS legislation. Hazards identification provides information on the hazard classification. This section of the safety data sheet describes the hazards of the chemical and the appropriate warning information associated with the hazards. The information provided here must include a hazard statement explaining all the hazards of the hazardous chemical. If the hazardous chemical is classified in accordance with the GHS, the appropriate hazard class and category should be indicated. For example, in the case of Dogabait PAPP wild dog bait, the classification is acute oral toxicity category 4 and germ cell mutagenicity category 2. Section 3 Summary. When registered with the APVMA, the product label is a legal document. Purchases of a hazardous chemical and a hazardous substance must be provided with the safety data sheets on first supply and subsequently on request. Users of 1080 and PAPP pest animal bait products are responsible for complying with the product label. Resellers must ensure that safety data sheets are readily accessible.